Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Monday, March 4th. The 2024 NFL Scouting Combine is in the books. All the workouts this past weekend. We did a Jaguars pre-combine prospect fits for round one. I named 5 guys. Did that a few weeks back. Wanted to look at those real quick. Talk about if some of those guys still make sense for the Jaguars. Talk about a couple other guys that I looked at prior to the combine, and then get 5 more new names for you that I think make sense for the Jaguars potentially in round one of the 2024 NFL draft. And again, these aren't just players that I like. These are players that I think that Trent Baalke, the Jaguars GM, and the Jaguars Brain Trust would potentially target for one reason or the other, maybe multiple reasons, potentially in round one. So we're going to get into it. If you enjoy the content here, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Can also check out genjag.com/shop. Pick up some new Duval gear. So looking at the players that I've mentioned before as potential fits for the Jaguars in round one, I mentioned Darius Mims as the first player a few weeks back, and I still think that holds true. I mean, unbelievable day for him at the combine. He had like 36 plus inch arms, 11 inch hands, 11 plus inches. Like, he was huge. He moved incredibly well. He ran well. What he did out there simply kind of brought back into focus how much of a freak he actually is as an athlete. And then you go look at the tape. Yes, there's only 8 starts, but this is not some raw project as a prospect. Like, this is a guy that has the ability to succeed in the NFL right now at right tackle. I think he could play guard as well, despite being really tall, because I think he has enough flexibility. And you might notice Murray hanging out in the background here with us. Y'all can say hi to her. But Darius Mims has enough flexibility to be able to play guard as well, in my opinion. The ability to play with leverage, to get low, to bend, right? I think that he's absolutely someone the Jaguars would love. Thought that before, still think it now. I still think Talise Fuaga is a prospect the Jaguars could potentially like as well, to maybe play right tackle long term, but maybe in 2024 play inside for you, depending on how free agency goes. Keon Coleman, I had mentioned, he ran a 4.61, but you saw in the gauntlet, out of all the receivers, he ran the fastest. He got up over 20 miles per hour in the gauntlet. That shows that he has the explosiveness. Also, the 38-inch vertical does as well. But that also shows the confidence that he has in his hands. And he has some of the best hands in this class, if not the best. I've been high on him for a while. Brian Thomas Jr. blew the doors off the combine. 6'3", 209 pounds. Unbelievable speed. 4.33 speed, excuse me. So he had a great day. Kool-Aid McKinstry. He had a Jones fracture at the combine. So we're going to see how long that takes to heal. Maybe we can get some testing numbers on him. Maybe not. But that's a guy that he did measure at least, and he was just under 6 feet, but did have 32-inch arms. That length is something you're really looking for in a press man corner. The Jaguars are going to run a lot of press in 2024 with Ryan Nielsen as their defensive coordinator. They don't really have a guy outside of Tyson Campbell right now that looks like a prototypical press man corner. Kool-Aid McKinstry would certainly be that. So talking about Coleman and McKinstry, they could be trade down targets now, because I just don't know that you're going to have a Keon Coleman coming off the board in the teens after running a 4.61 40-yard dash, despite how impressive he was, in my opinion, through a lot of the rest of the combine and on tape. So maybe you could trade down and land him. Maybe with Kool-Aid McKinstry, getting value by trading down and landing someone who probably should be drafted in the teens, but because of circumstances like the Jones fracture, maybe not. Maybe those are guys that you could land in round 2 if you wanted to trade up, right? There's different avenues to landing those players, but I still think, based on what we've seen from them, all of them make sense for the Jaguars as guys that Trent Baalke would value. I also talked about Tyler Guyton making sense potentially as well for the Jaguars. He's not a first-round player for me. He is a day 2 player, but I could see Trent Baalke falling in love with some of those traits as well. So those are the guys we already talked about. Now we're going to dive into 5 more names that I think the Jaguars could definitely be interested in. And there are so many different ways this thing could go down, over the next couple weeks, right? We have the franchise tag window closing. We have the new league year starting. We have free agency getting going. So there's a lot that can happen that can kind of potentially dictate or show us where the Jaguars might go in the NFL draft. And we'll see how it plays out. But I think the one major certainty, the one real certainty I kind of have, Josh Allen will be part of the Jaguars' plans, whether he's franchise tagged or they get a long-term deal done. I think the franchise tag is most likely. That's been the case for a long time. But you look at Calvin Ridley, I mean, who knows at this point? It looks like all these other wide receivers that are big names, they're getting signed back with their teams. Calvin Ridley, it's rumored, it's reported that there are some teams that would be willing to really throw a bag at Calvin Ridley. So if the Jaguars don't bring Calvin Ridley back, wide receiver could definitely be on the board for them in round one. I still think cornerback could be the position that they go if the right guy is there in round one. You can never go wrong with offensive tackle or defensive line, whether it's edge or interior defensive line. So there's a lot of options moving forward for the Jaguars. And here are the 5 prospects that after the NFL Combine, I'm adding to that list of potential fits for the Jags in round one. Troy Fanu, offensive tackle. A lot of people think he can play guard or center. He did play some guard at Washington last year, or in 2022. Played left tackle for them in 2023. He's 6'4", 315 pounds. So similar size to Anton Harrison, who they took in the first round last year. 34.5-inch arms, excellent proportional length, 501 40-yard dash, very good. 1.71 10-yard split, really, really good for Troy Fanu, showing him his explosiveness and quickness off the line. A good 32.5-inch vert, 9.5 broad. He had a really good day from the testing numbers, but also when you look at what he did on the on-field work, he was incredibly smooth. And when you watch him on tape at Washington, that's exactly what he is. He's a guy that can be a pro pass protector, in my opinion, at tackle, guard, center, whatever it may be. So this is a player that I think has the length that Trent Baalke looks for. He has great athleticism. He has positional versatility, which is something that Doug Peterson has talked a lot about with his offensive linemen. So I definitely think he would be an option for the Jaguars at 17 if he falls that far. And there are so many tackles in this class that are going to go early and throughout the first couple days of the draft that just have tons of potential, great prospects. I think it's a fantastic tackle class. I think Troy Fanu is definitely one that could make sense for the Jaguars and be in that range at 17 overall. Looking at wide receiver, Adon Mitchell, Troy Fanu, that's one of the guys I have been extremely high on this entire draft cycle. One of my guys, if you checked out my video last week on Rogue Football, my guys for every position in the NFL draft, one of them was Troy Fanu. Another one, Adon Mitchell, who came in at 6'2" and 205 pounds, 32 3/8-inch arms. All those numbers check boxes, right? 4.34 40-yard dash, absolutely blazing. 1.52 10 split, 39.5-inch vert, 11.4 broad. He was awesome. And this is a guy that, for me, all the boxes have been checked now. Like, you've seen the production over the last couple years. He got even more productive at Texas this past year, despite being in a run-first offense, despite having Xavier Worthy on the other side of him and a ton of talent. Jatavion Sanders, quarterbacks getting injured, coming in and out of the lineup, different things. Adon Mitchell still had a great season. I thought he looked really good the year prior as well at Georgia. So this is a player that I think has the ball skills, the hands, the route running chops, the separation ability, all the testing numbers off the chart. Came in at 205 after being listed at 196, I believe. He looked like he was carrying enough mass on his frame to be a legitimate X receiver. I think Adon Mitchell definitely solidified himself as a first-round pick, and I think he's a player that, with his traits, makes sense for the Jaguars at 17 overall. Talking about corner, we've talked about Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold would absolutely be targets, but I kind of have a hard time seeing them make it. I think they're going to be the top 2 corners off the board. I don't know that Nate Wiggins will be a fit, quite honestly. He's insanely light at 173, and it looks like it on the field as well on his tape, right? A guy that really struggles with the physicality of the game, especially in the tackling department. Coming downhill and being physical as a press man corner against the run, that could be an issue. Then you also, much shorter arms than you expected, right? A guy that's over 6 feet tall, but his arm length, not really where you want it. So I don't know that that's going to be a fit necessarily for what Trent Baalke wants, for what Ryan Nielsen would want in a prototypical corner, but obviously the 4.29 speed is insane, right? And I will say one little knock on him. He was asked by Mia O'Brien about Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, and those guys were before me. They weren't there at Clemson with me. It's like, okay, you're both Clemson legacy guys. Y'all are Clemson alma mater, right? Or maybe not alma mater. I don't know if he graduated, but you went to Clemson. This is a proud football program, and you can't say anything positive about Trevor Lawrence or Travis Etienne, two legends of the program. I thought that was a little weird. Doesn't matter either way. It's neither here nor there. But for me, again, Nate Wiggins, I don't know. For me, I would be sketched out drafting him that early. I'd be worried about his lack of physicality. I certainly would be. Now, cornerback who could make sense. Again, I do think Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, absolutely. The Jaguars would love it if they fell into their range, but I kind of doubt it because I think they're going to be the first two corners off the board. I think potentially Ennis Rakestraw, if he can improve his testing at his pro day, because he had a groin injury that he was battling through during this workout, maybe he makes sense for the Jaguars. He has length, 32-inch arms. He plays with maybe unparalleled physicality and aggressiveness at the position, a very good tackler. So you're talking about a lot of these traits adding up as Ryan Nielsen, press man, corner type of traits. If he could show that he's a good testing athlete at his pro day for Mizzou, combined with the athleticism and physicality and tenaciousness that he shows on tape and the length, maybe you're talking about Ennis Rakestraw as a potential fit for the Jaguars. I don't have him as one of the five guys we're talking about, but that's someone to keep an eye on for sure, in my opinion. I don't necessarily think any of the DTs that are going to go in round one are fits for the Jaguars. They're short-armed. Talking about Byron Murphy. Talking about Johnny Newton out of Illinois. Those are the two guys that I think would make sense in this range if they were on the board, and I like both of them a lot, and I think that they could do great in a Ryan Nielsen defense, but I'm just not sure that they would fit what Trent Baalke's looking for. I do think there's some edge prospects that make sense for sure. One in particular, Jared Verse, at 6'4" and 254 pounds with 33.5-inch arms. He ran a 4.58 40-yard dash, 1.610 split, 35-inch vert, 10.7 broad. He had a day for sure. Agility testing was only so-so, but he is incredibly explosive, has great speed to power. I think Dallas Turner will come off the board before him. I love Chop Robinson as well, but I'm not sure that Baalke goes for those short arms in round one, right? I think that if Jared Verse was on the board at 17, they would have a hard time passing. And again, that kind of would make sense in a scenario where the Jaguars kind of stand pat at edge outside of Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, and then they bring in Jared Verse to be that Swiss Army knife up front that can rush from the interior, can rush from the edge, do a lot of different things for you, play the run well, obviously create speed to power against the pass, and penetrate into that backfield. So I think he could make a three-headed monster with your outside edge rushers in Jacksonville. Another prospect who didn't actually test, but I really do think could be Baalke built, right? J.C. Latham, the offensive tackle out of Alabama, 6'6", 342 pounds, 35 and 1/8-inch arms, really long arms, 11-inch hands, big hands. Did not work out again, but I really like the tape. He's very young. He's very competitive, and a guy that I think that the arrow is pointing up for him. I did listen to his combine press conference, and he sounded like a really smart young guy. He said went to IMG after being in Milwaukee, went to IMG Academy because he wanted to be in a competitive environment, went to Alabama because he wanted to be in a competitive environment. I think he's focused. I think he's locked in. I think he wants to be a star in the NFL, and he certainly has the ability and talent and frame to do so. So I think J.C. Latham could definitely be a target for the Jaguars at 17. And I think he's a player that could play guard for you as well. In year one, if Cam Robinson's back, if, Anton Harrison and Walker Little, maybe you just plug in J.C. Latham at guard. He does need to work on maybe being a little overly aggressive at times, but as a coach, you would rather have someone that's overly aggressive and try to tone it down a little bit than the other way around. So I think J.C. Latham is going to go probably somewhere in the teens, and I think it could be to the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this offensive tackle class, Like I've said, it's incredible. So who knows where some of these guys end up going? It's going to be kind of like a pick your flavor sort of deal with some of these offensive tackles at the top of the draft. My final guy here is another edge, if you want to call him that. But I still think Darius Robinson could absolutely be a target for Trent Baalke at 17. The slowest 40-yard dash among all edge players, 4.95, 1.73, 10 split. Not great. But guess what? He's the biggest edge player out there, by far. The only one that compared was Brandon Dorless, and Dorless really, I don't know how to evaluate him right now because he was listed at in close to 300. He came into the Senior Bowl at like 272. Then he's in the 280s at the Combine. He's a little bit of a confusing evaluation for me, but to me, Darius Robinson is not a confusing evaluation. 6'5", 285 pounds, 34 and a half inch arms, 10 and 5/8 inch hands, big hands, powerful hands, great length, 35-inch vert. That's what shows the short area explosiveness for Darius Robinson that you consistently saw on tape after they moved him out to edge, and what you saw at the Senior Bowl. So the vertical jump shows that explosiveness that the 40-yard dash and the broad jump kind of didn't. This guy's just way bigger than most of the rest of these edge players. He has a different type of ball game. He is explosive. He has great length, strength, power, a variety of ways to win with his hands and his length. You can move him around the defensive front. There's no question about that. Look, he looks like a prototypical Saints defensive end. I mean, he looks a lot like Cam Jordan out there size-wise. A Falcons defensive end, they like the big boys as well. Calais Campbell. And why I'm saying Falcons and Saints, that's where Ryan Nielsen comes from. And Ryan Nielsen is a former defensive line coach. So he likes the big defensive ends, right? And then Trent Baalke, he likes a big defensive end. Brought in Trayvon Walker with the number 1 overall pick. So I still think Darius Robinson, despite not having a great 40-yard dash, could be Baalke built. Because he can play the run, no doubt about it, on the edge. He can move around the defensive front. Great length, big hands. Trent Baalke talked about we need to get bigger, stronger, and faster. I think Darius Robinson would help them out, certainly in the bigger and stronger part. But yeah, you want to have some fun with some math here. Said no one ever, right? But you might be talking about, well, some of these guys, how are they going to fall to 17? If there's 4 quarterbacks off the board, which I expect to be, right? Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, yeah. 3 offensive tackles, which it could be any number of these tackles. Could be more than 3 offensive tackles. But that's 7 players right there. 1 edge player. I think Dallas Turner definitely at least will go off the board. That's 8 players. 4 wide receivers. Talking about Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, probably Brian Thomas Jr., a defensive tackle, probably Byron Murphy, 3 cornerbacks. Talked about Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, probably Nate Wiggins as well with that 4.29 40-yard dash. That's 16 players right there. That's where the Jaguars pick. So I think a lot of these guys could be available that we've talked about. A lot of the 10 guys or so that we've talked about being really quality fits for the Jaguars in terms of what Trent Baalke has shown that he values at certain positions and how these different positions could play out for the Jaguars over the next couple weeks. A lot of these guys could definitely be there for them. And maybe there's some guys that fall down the board that I don't expect to at this point that could make sense for them as well. But yeah, I think at least one of these guys that we've talked about is probably going to be there for the Jaguars and might be the pick. The other thing here, though, I absolutely do think that Trent Baalke would like to trade down again if the board falls the right way. If there's multiple guys they feel good about at 17, I think he would love to trade down and get more value. You've seen him do that. The last year did it a couple times in the first round and then did it in the second round as well. So we'll see how it all plays out. But hope this was informative. Hope it kind of helps you put a broader picture on what the Jaguars might do with the 17th overall pick, their first pick in the first round. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You can also check out genjag.com/shop. Pick up some new Duval gear if you want to support the channel even further. Thanks so much. Y'all have a good one.